My name is Jared. If someone had told me 6 years ago that I'd one day be pouring my heart out to strangers online, I probably would have laughed. Back then, my life felt simple, almost predictable. I was madly in love, married to the woman I believed I'd grow old with, and my biggest dilemma was deciding whether to make spaghetti or tacos for dinner. Life, however, has a peculiar way of flipping the script. Where it all began. Let's rewind to college, the place where I first met Evelyn, or Evie as she loved to call herself. It was during freshman orientation, and she was impossible to miss. Tall, confident, with a smile that could light up an entire stadium, Evie had a way of making every head turn. While the rest of us stumbled through campus with crumpled schedules and nervous energy, she was already commanding attention like a natural-born leader. And me? I was the awkward guy trying not to spill coffee all over my welcome packet. Fate intervened at a campus coffee shop. She accidentally bumped into me while reaching for a napkin, a move she later admitted wasn't accidental at all. That chance meeting turned into a conversation about everything. Music, ambitions, and dreams. She shared her vision of becoming a fashion influencer, traveling the world and gracing magazine covers. It sounded like a far-fetched dream to me, but her passion was intoxicating. Before I knew it, we were inseparable. The fairy tale wedding. Fast forward a few years and we were standing at the altar. Our wedding was straight out of a Pinterest board. Twinkling fairy lights, mason jars adorned with handwritten name tags, and Evie radiating elegance in a lace gown that took my breath away. At that moment, I genuinely believed I'd hit the jackpot. I was marrying the love of my life, the woman who laughed at my bad jokes and made every moment feel magical. Little did I know, the dream would eventually turn into a nightmare. The rise of the influencer. The first few years of our marriage were blissful. Evie was relentless in chasing her dream of building an online presence. While I established myself as a software engineer, she spent hours meticulously planning photo shoots, editing content, and networking with other influencers. When her account started gaining traction, I was her biggest cheerleader. Watching her land her first major brand deal felt like winning the lottery. But here's what no one tells you about social media fame: it's a double-edged sword. As her follower count skyrocketed, so did her obsession with her online persona. Suddenly, everything was about the brand. Our date nights transformed into content creation sessions. Vacations became carefully curated photo shoots. Every sunset was a potential Instagram post, every cocktail an accessory for her aesthetic. The more I suggested we live in the moment, the more distant she became. I told myself it was just a phase. She was hustling, chasing her dreams. But deep down, I started noticing the cracks. The woman I fell in love with, the one who shared cheap ramen with me during finals and danced to silly songs in the kitchen, was slipping away. In her place was someone consumed by likes, comments, and followers. The gym and the fit queens. Things took a darker turn when Evie became obsessed with the gym. At first, I supported her, it seemed healthy and I admired her discipline. But the gym quickly evolved into a lifestyle I didn't recognize. She joined a group of equally obsessive friends who called themselves the Fit Queens. Young, single, and always looking for the next thrill, they pulled her into a whirlwind of protein shakes, weekend brunches, and late-night bar crawls. She'd come home reeking of tequila and perfume, laughing at inside jokes I wasn't a part of. "Just a girl's night," she'd say, brushing off my concerns. I wanted to believe her. I trusted her. But with each passing day, I felt her slipping further away. Living in two worlds. While Evie's world grew shinier and more extravagant, mine stayed grounded. I worked long hours at a job I loved, steadily climbing the career ladder and pulling in six figures. Stability was my thing. I prided myself on ensuring we'd never have to worry about bills or emergencies. Evie, on the other hand, lived for the next big flex. Designer handbags, luxury vacations, free PR packages, they became her currency, her measure of success. One night, after a grueling 12-hour workday, I came home to find our living room transformed into a chaotic photo studio. Tripods, ring lights, and discarded outfits cluttered every inch of space. It was like walking onto the set of a budget photo shoot. "Babe, can you help me with the lighting?" she called out, barely glancing at me. I bit my tongue and helped, but inside I was screaming. Couldn't we just have a normal dinner for once? That was the moment I realized we were living in two completely different worlds. Mine filled with deadlines and spreadsheets, hers consumed by hashtags and DMs. The phone call. The breaking point came late one night. I was in bed, scrolling through work emails, while Evie's voice carried from the living room. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but when I heard her say, "You're just so much fun to talk to," my stomach churned. I froze, straining to hear more. "Yeah, he's fine. Just, boring sometimes." But enough about him. What are you doing tomorrow? She continued, her tone playful and flirtatious. That word, boring, cut deeper than any insult ever could. She was talking about me, the man who worked tirelessly to give her the freedom to chase her dreams, the man who still tried to surprise her with flowers and date nights despite her indifference. I felt a storm brewing inside me. Part of me wanted to march into the living room and confront her, but the smarter part of me knew I needed proof. The phone. When Evie left her phone on the nightstand before hopping in the shower, my heart raced. I stared at it, debating whether to take the leap. I wasn't proud of myself, but I needed answers. And so, trembling, I reached for her phone. What I found that night would shatter the foundation of everything we had built. I hoped it wasn't true, but my gut told me otherwise. Unlocking Evie's phone was easier than I imagined. She'd never been tech-savvy and her passcode hadn't changed in years. As the screen lit up, a pang of guilt stabbed at my conscience. This was her private world, a space I'd always respected. But that trust was a two-way street and she'd shattered it. I wasn't invading her privacy, I was uncovering the truth. I went straight to her messages. And there it was, glaring back at me like a punch to the stomach. A group chat titled Fit Queens Unite. My heart sank as I scrolled through the messages. They were graphic. Emojis littered conversations about late-night escapades and wild plans, but one message from Evie stopped me cold. Honestly, he has no idea. I'm too beautiful to be tied down like this. I deserve to have fun, and if that means a few harmless nights, so be it. My hands trembled as I continued reading. Jared's so boring sometimes. Like, I know he's a good guy, but I didn't sign up to waste my prime years being a housewife. I want excitement. Attention. I missed out on mine hoe phase, and it's time I fix that. Laughter emojis from her friends followed, paired with words of encouragement. One even wrote, "Girl, if he's boring, why not upgrade? You're a total catch." I felt a mix of boiling rage and crushing despair. It wasn't just about her betrayal. It was the way she spoke about me, like I was nothing more than a hurdle in her quest for excitement. The sacrifices I'd made, the late nights working to build a stable life for us, all dismissed as irrelevant. But it didn't end there. As I scrolled further, I found him. A conversation with someone named Ryan. Opening it felt like ripping off a band-aid only to discover a wound that was far deeper than I'd anticipated. Flirty texts. Inside jokes. Plans to meet up. And then pictures. Not explicit, but intimate enough to confirm that this was no casual friendship. My stomach churned as my hands began to shake. This wasn't just harmless fun. This was a full-blown betrayal. A slap in the face to everything I thought we had. That's when I heard her footsteps. I quickly locked the phone and placed it back on the nightstand, lying down and pretending to scroll through my own screen. She walked in, humming a tune as if nothing had happened, her face serene. "Good night," she said casually, flipping off her lamp and slipping into bed. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My mind was a whirlwind of anger, sadness, and disbelief. The next day. The following morning was surreal. Evie was her usual bubbly self, humming along to a pop song as she made her smoothie. She flashed me her radiant smile, the same one that once melted my heart. But now it only made my stomach churn. I spent the day at work going through the motions, replaying everything I'd read over and over in my mind. I knew I couldn't let this fester. Confrontation was inevitable, but it had to be on my terms. That evening, she came home later than usual, her cheeks flushed and her breath carrying the faint scent of tequila and her signature vanilla perfume. She laughed a little too loudly as she dropped her bag on the counter. "Fun night with the girls?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. "Oh, totally," she said, brushing her hair back. "Just hit a couple of bars. Nothing crazy." I nodded, biting my tongue to keep from saying what was really on my mind. I waited until she disappeared into the bathroom before glancing at her phone on the counter. It buzzed. A message lit up the screen. "Ryan, miss me yet?" My heart stopped for a moment, then something inside me snapped. Before I could stop myself, I grabbed her phone, opened the chat, and started typing. The confrontation. Me, "Hey Ryan. Just a heads up, I've been benching 250 at the gym and thinking of testing out your skull next." I paused, letting a smirk creep onto my face. This was oddly satisfying. Me, "Also, if you think sneaking around with someone else's wife makes you a man, you're in for a rude awakening. You're not a man, Ryan. You're a protein shake with legs." His reply came almost instantly. "Ryan, whoa, Evie?" Me, nope. Just her boring husband. The one paying the bills while you play Romeo at the squat rack. I was about to keep going when I heard the bathroom door creak open behind me. "What the hell are you doing?" Evie's voice was sharp, slicing through the air like a dagger. I turned to face her, phone in hand. She stood there, hair damp and clutching a towel, her face a mix of shock and fury. Well, I said, my voice calm but laced with venom. Care to explain why your gym buddy thinks it's okay to send you messages like this? Her face went pale. Give me my phone, Jared. Oh, I don't think so. I held it out of her reach. Ryan and I are having a lovely chat. Did you know he called you fire hot? Cute, right? She lunged for the phone but I stepped back, my voice rising. Don't even think about it, Evie. You don't get to play the victim here. How dare you go through my messages? She snapped, her voice shaking with anger. That's such an invasion of privacy. I let out a bitter laugh. Privacy? You're worried about privacy while you've been sneaking around behind my back? Spare me the lecture. Her jaw tightened and for a moment, it seemed like she'd argue. But then I held up the phone, scrolling through the chat. This one's my favorite, I said mockingly, reading aloud. Miss me yet? You looked so good in that black dress last night. She went silent, her face flushing crimson. Jared, please let me explain, she stammered, tears welling in her eyes. Explain what? I snapped. That you think you're too beautiful to be faithful? That I'm just a boring paycheck funding your influencer lifestyle? Her tears fell freely now, but I didn't care. You don't understand, she whispered. Oh, I understand perfectly, I shot back. You're selfish, Evie. You care more about likes and followers than the man who's been in your corner for 6 years. I tossed her phone onto the couch, my voice cold and final. Pack your things. You're leaving tonight? She sobbed, stepping closer. Jared, please. It was just a mistake. I'll fix it. But I was done. Too much damage had been done. I promise you, Evie, I said, my voice hard as steel. You don't get to fix this. You don't get to rewrite the rules just because you're sorry you got caught. We're done. Her tears fell freely, but they didn't move me. Without another word, I turned and walked into the bedroom. Grabbing her suitcase, I began packing her things with cold precision. She followed me, her sobs filling the air, pleading with me to stop. Jared, please, she begged, her voice breaking. Don't do this. I can make it right. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. She had already done enough damage. When I finished packing, I set the suitcase by the door and called her an Uber. As the minutes ticked by, her cries turned to silence, replaced by the sound of her shallow breathing. When the car arrived, I handed her the suitcase. You can stay at your mom's place, I said flatly, my tone devoid of emotion. I'll have the rest of your things sent over later. She stood in the doorway, her sobs echoing in the quiet of the house. Jared, I love you, she whispered, her voice trembling. I didn't respond. I just closed the door behind her. The aftermath. The night after Evie left was surreal. The house, once alive with her energy, felt eerily silent. There were no ring lights cluttering the living room, no impromptu TikTok dances in the kitchen. For the first time in years, I had the place to myself. But instead of feeling free, I felt hollow. Still, if there's one thing about me, it's that I don't crumble under pressure. Evie might have shattered my trust and stomped on my heart, but I still had my self-respect. And I was determined to fight for the life I had left. The next morning, I made 2 phone calls. One to a lawyer and one to my best friend, Adam. You did what? Adam choked out, nearly spilling his coffee when I told him the story. You kicked her out? Just like that? Damn right I did, I said, pacing my living room. What was I supposed to do? Sit here and pretend everything's fine while she's out there flirting with some gym clown? Adam let out a low whistle. Man, I knew she had an ego, but this is next level. Yeah, tell me about it, I muttered. The worst part? She's not even sorry for what she did. She's just sorry she got caught. Adam sighed. Well, if you need help moving her stuff out, let me know. Or if you want, I can slash Ryan's tires. For the first time in days, I laughed. I'll keep that in mind. The legal battle begins. The call with the lawyer wasn't as amusing. Divorcing someone like Evie wasn't going to be as simple as kicking her out. She had rights, and if I wasn't careful, she could go after a significant chunk of my savings. Do you have any documentation of her infidelity? The lawyer asked. Plenty, I replied, recalling the screenshots I'd taken. Text, group chats, you name it. Good, he said. That's going to help. But we need to be strategic. If she's as self-centered as you say, she'll likely try to paint herself as the victim. I groaned. Of course she will. She's already a pro at playing to an audience. Then don't let her get ahead of it, he advised. I'll start drafting the paperwork. In the meantime, keep your head down and don't engage with her, no matter what she says or does. Evie's meltdown. At first, Evie was apologetic. She called me incessantly, leaving tearful voicemails about how much she regretted everything and wanted to fix things. But when I didn't respond, her tone shifted. "You think you're so perfect, Jared," one voicemail began. "Newsflash, you're not. Maybe if you weren't so boring, I wouldn't have needed attention elsewhere." By the end of the week, she took her grievances to social media. Of course she did. Her Instagram was a whirlwind of cryptic posts. Photos of sunsets with captions like, "When love turns to control, it's time to set yourself free." Her stories were even worse. Snippets of sad love songs, wine glasses in dimly lit rooms, and vague complaints about how some people just don't appreciate a strong woman. At first I ignored it. But then a coworker sent me a screenshot that nearly made me spit out my coffee. It was a selfie of Evie, teary-eyed, her hand dramatically clutching her chest. The caption read, "Betrayed. Abandoned. Left to rebuild. But a queen always rises. #independent woman, #new beginnings." The comments were a mix of sympathy and skepticism. Her followers didn't know the whole story, but some were clearly starting to question her narrative. One comment stood out, "Wait, didn't you cheat on him?" That's when I realized I had the upper hand. The turning point. A week later, Evie was served with the divorce papers. I didn't deliver them myself. I had Adam drop them off at her mom's house. According to him, she didn't take it well. She was fuming, Adam said, over drinks that night. Like full-on meltdown mode. I swear I could hear her screaming through the door. "Good," I said, taking a sip of my beer. "She deserves to know what it feels like to lose control for once." "Yeah, well, don't celebrate just yet," Adam warned. "She's not the type to go down without a fight." He was right. The next day, I received an email from her lawyer demanding half of everything. The house, my savings, even my car. It was laughable. Evie, who had spent years flaunting her independence, was now acting as though she couldn't survive without my paycheck. My lawyer wasn't fazed. "Let her ask for the moon," he said. "She's not getting it, especially not with the evidence we have." Evie's fatal mistake. If there's one thing about Evie, it's that she never knew when to quit. While I quietly built my case, she continued doing what she did best, oversharing. Every post, every story, every passive-aggressive dig at me was like watching someone light a match in a room full of gasoline. Her social media meltdown was both tragic and, if I'm honest, entertaining. Then she made her biggest mistake. One night, while scrolling through Instagram, I noticed she was live streaming. Curiosity got the better of me, so I clicked. There she was, sitting on her couch with a glass of wine, her cheeks flushed and her words slightly slurred. "You know," she began. "The fall of Evie and my rise to freedom." "You know," Evie began, tossing her hair dramatically during her drunken live stream. "People think they know me, think they know my story. But let me tell you something, they don't." I cringed as I watched the train wreck unfold. Her face was flushed from too much wine, and she swirled her glass like she was auditioning for a soap opera. "My ex, well, soon-to-be ex," she continued with a bitter laugh, "he's just so boring. Sure, he's a good provider or whatever, but where's the passion? The fun? I deserve someone who makes me feel alive." The comments section was a battlefield. Some of her followers sent hearts and fire emojis, but others weren't buying her act. "Girl, wasn't he the one paying all your bills? Didn't you cheat on him though? Maybe focus on yourself instead of blaming him." I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then she said the words that made my blood boil. "Honestly," she slurred, "if I'd known he'd react this way, I wouldn't have bothered sneaking around. Like, yeah, I made a mistake, but who hasn't? He just couldn't handle a woman like me." That was it. I slammed my phone down, closed the app, and called my lawyer. The next day, we added her live stream to the growing mountain of evidence. Between the screenshots, texts, and now her public admission, our case against her was airtight. Evie's self-destruction. Evie wasn't done. A few days later, I got a frantic text from Adam. "Dude, have you seen her latest post?" Curiosity got the better of me and I opened Instagram. There it was, a picture of Evie posing in front of the gym, her face set in a mock-serious expression. The caption? "They say you don't know what you have until it's gone. But sometimes what you lose wasn't worth keeping. Starting fresh. Leaving the toxicity behind. Focusing on me." It wasn't the caption that got me, it was the comments. "Wait, didn't you cheat on your husband? Is this the same guy who bought you a car? Toxic? Sis, you're the toxic one." Her carefully curated image was crumbling, and the best part? She was the one lighting the match. By the time we got to court, Evie was a shadow of her former self. The confidence she once wielded like a weapon was gone, replaced by a brittle veneer that cracked under scrutiny. Her social media meltdown had cost her sponsorships, and her lawyer's demands had become increasingly desperate. The judge, however, was unmoved. Between her livestream confession, the screenshots, and her blatant lack of remorse, it didn't take long for the court to rule in my favor. Evie walked away with her car and a small savings account. That was it. I, on the other hand, kept the house, my savings, and, most importantly, my peace of mind. As the ruling was delivered, Evie shot me a look I'll never forget, a mix of anger, disbelief, and maybe a sliver of regret. But by then it didn't matter. I was done. A new chapter. That night Adam and I went out to celebrate. To new beginnings, he said, raising his glass. To peace and quiet, I replied, clinking mine against his. For the first time in years I felt light. The weight of Evie's chaos was gone, and with it the constant tension that had gripped my life. The house, once overrun with her clutter, ring lights, delivery boxes, workout gear, was mine again. Quiet. Peaceful. The way it should be. At first, I wasn't sure what to do with the empty space, both in my home and in my heart. I'd spent so many years wrapped up in Evie's world, her drama, her ambitions, her constant need for attention, that I'd forgotten what it felt like to just be me. But slowly I began to figure it out. Rediscovering myself. Evie, from what I've heard, hasn't bounced back. She tried to double down on the whole independent queen act on Instagram, but her followers weren't buying it. Her numbers dwindled, sponsors dropped her, and her attempts to rebrand as a self-love coach fell flat. It's hard to preach self-love when the internet knows you as the woman who sabotaged her own marriage. She even tried reaching out to me a couple of times. The first was a drunken voicemail, half crying, half yelling about how unfair everything was. The second was an email. Long, rambling, filled with her usual Evieisms about how she missed me, how she realized she'd made mistakes, how we could still fix things. I didn't respond. Why would I? That chapter of my life was closed. Instead, I focused on myself. I started going to the gym regularly. Turns out lifting weights is a great way to process anger. I reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with during the Evie era. And most importantly, I started doing things I actually enjoyed. Traveling was one of those things. 4 years, our vacations had been all about Evie's content. Staged photos, elaborate outfits, hours chasing the perfect golden hour light. But my first solo trip? No cameras, no schedules, just me and the open road. It was liberating. Work too became a bright spot. Without Evie's constant demands and distractions, I poured my energy into my career. Last month I got a promotion. It felt like the universe's way of saying, you're on the right track, Jared. Lessons learned. Looking back, it's easy to feel bitter. Evie took a lot from me, my trust, my stability, years I'll never get back. But holding on to anger only hurts you. So, instead of dwelling on the past, I've chosen to see it as a lesson. Red flags are there for a reason. I ignored so many early on. Her need for constant validation, her obsession with appearances, her dismissal of my feelings. Never again. Trust but verify. Trust is earned, not given freely. Put yourself first. You can't pour from an empty cup. Life goes on. No matter how betrayed you feel, there's always a way forward. You just have to take the first step. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder how things might have been different if Evie had just been honest. About herself, about her unhappiness. Maybe we could have worked it out. Or maybe not. Either way, it would have been better than the mess she created. But you know what? I'm grateful it happened the way it did. Because now I'm free. Free to live my life without her chaos. Free to rediscover who I am. And honestly, life's pretty damn good.